Alright guys, I'm here back with a new video, and in this video, I'm back with another Survivor ranking here. Again, this one more of an entertainment-based one. Here, I will be ranking every loved one visit in the history of Survivor US, which I have mentioned in the past, I'm not a big fan of the family visit. However, I think something I've realized through the process of making this video is that it's not necessarily that I'm not a big fan of family visits in general. I'm just not a fan of how they've been handling recent family visits, which we will obviously get around to talking about. But here I will be ranking every family visit in the history of the show based on how entertaining I feel like they are. Now, to set the ground rules for this, I will only be including on-island visits, so no videos from home or even video calls will be included in this, and through that, Survivor Africa will be one that will not be included on this list, and also there's just other seasons that just simply didn't have a family visit, with seasons like Survivor Fiji and Samoa, Blood vs. Waters 1 and 2 both didn't have it, Wrong, then obviously the post-COVID seasons. So obviously all those won't be included, but we still have 34 family visits to rank here. And at the bottom, at number 34, the worst family visit, in my opinion, has to be Survivor Island of the Idols. And straight up, this one's just a mostly uneventful one. Again, this is in the modern family visit format, which I really just don't like. Again, I think something that has been kind of lost with the family visit over time is that the family visit used to be more so about the loved ones and seeing how they interact with being in this Survivor environment, and through that came a lot of fun character moments through these family visits. However, I feel like that's something that's completely lost in the modern family visit format, where now it's more so about the players and their relationships with their loved ones, and them talking about how much their loved one means to them and all that stuff. And it's I really don't care. Again, it's nice for the players, obviously. Again, it's nice to see Lauren and her husband are reuniting, Tommy and his girlfriend, Janet and her husband, Dean and his mom. It's it's nice for them, but I don't care. Now, I will say, I do think there's a couple good moments here. Again, Karishma and her husband, I feel like considering her arc across the season, I think was a really nice moment. Janet finds out she's having a granddaughter. Nora and her sister had a fun interaction, though, it's Nora, so what do you expect? Lee and her girlfriend also had a good moment, but beyond that, again, we get pretty boring challenge that, again, I think is another thing that I don't like about modern seasons, is how it usually pertains to the survivors playing in a challenge by themselves to win their loved ones, which miss when the loved ones were actually interacting throughout all this. And also it leads to the reward segment usually being just skimmed over. It usually doesn't matter, and we get very little from loved ones there as well. I think that's an underwhelming aspect of modern loved one visits. But what makes this one the worst for me is the fact that we also get a lot about Dan Spilo. And it is so weird that this still made the show, where, I guess it's how do you edit this out? But it's still weird that Dan Spilo has his son, his 13-year-old son, come out there, and we get so much content based around him and his son. And it's, again, just bizarre. Why is this guy still on the show? But just considering the real awkwardness of this entire situation for me, I decided to leave this one as the worst family visit here. Next up at number 33, we're moving on to a family visit that is not actually in the modern format, but it's one that is just largely forgettable, and that is the loved ones visit from Survivor Redemption Island. Now, this is one that, again, really gets skimmed over. Again, it's such a small part of the episode, mainly because this is a season with Redemption Island, and the way that the loved ones gets determined here is that the winner of the Redemption Island duel, in this situation Matt Chisel, ends up having to make this decision. He makes a decision on either getting his own loved one, and his mom, or he can give loved ones to his fellow Redemption Islanders in Matt and Ralph, or he can give it to everyone left in the game. And really, this is kind of an obvious decision. And when you can give a loved one's visit to 6 people versus 1 or 2, obviously you're going to pick the 6, so obviously he picks the people still in the game. But again, he gets a lot of glorification over doing this, even though, again, I feel like it's the obvious move. But also, again, they barely get anything to do. The family visit is just so forgettable here, where they get to go back to camp, and we have a couple people talking about their loved ones, but really nothing of note happens here outside of, I guess, Rob getting the shirt of his family, which later leads to a funny moment later in the episode. But again, as for this particular scene, nothing of note really happens here with the loved ones. And really, this would be the worst if it wasn't for Dan Spilo being involved in the IOI one. So again, just completely forgettable one here. It's here at number 33. Now, number 32, moving on to another pretty forgettable one, and that comes from Survivor Palau. And this is one that is just kind of weird because like it's one where the players themselves are not even told about the family visit. And it just like randomly happens during one of the rewards where we do see Greg win a reward and take Katie and Jen to where they get the overnight stay on a boat. And when there, they are surprised by their loved ones. And again, not much of intrigue really happens here. I will say there's one like really weird moment where in a callback to Survivor Borneo, I guess, which we will talk about, we do have Greg getting a massage, only for the masseuse to be swapped out with his loved one, who smacks him in the ass, which is the way that this gets revealed, which is just such a weird thing here. But again, like we see them on the reward, they go watch dolphins and dive with them, that's a thing. But really outside of that, again, like the loved ones have nothing to truly do here. Like they're outside of Greg's friend in that one moment, it's like they're just there. And really for me, the more notable scene of all this is their return to camp after the family leaves, to where we do see Tom being upset that he didn't get his loved one. And I feel like to me, that's the more notable moment of all this. So again, like really just not a super memorable moment, and it's here at number 32. Now number 31, we are moving on to another pretty forgettable loved ones visit for me, and that is the loved ones visit from Survivor, the Amazon, which is one that I think has a notable dilemma here. Again, it is the first time that person gets the choice of giving up their loved one for someone else, where you see Matt win the challenge, and is obviously given the option to give up his visit to give everyone else their visits, and he obviously does it, as you would expect. And through this, we do get a funny confessional from Matthew where he declares himself a god, which I always found funny. But again, I'll say that there's not much of intrigue really going on here. Again, everyone gets their loved ones and they get to talk around the table for a few minutes. But then eventually they leave, and it's revealed that Matthew also gets his loved one anyway, and they end up having this evening where they get to watch this like Amazonian tribe performance, and again, it's really boring. I will say the one thing of humor from all this too is that Matt's content with his mom is kind of weird. And again, we'll get to another more notable one down the road. But again, there is talk about how they don't have the normal mother-son relationship, and Matthew even calls it a romantic evening, which is just weird. But again, like as a whole, super forgettable one for me. It's here at number 31. It's here at number 32. Now number 30, we're finally getting around to the more recent family visits. Again, the ones that I don't like because of how they're formatted. And we're starting it off with Survivor Ghost Island. And Ghost Island happened. Again, like it's in the typical style of family visits of the modern day where loved ones come in one by one. You get Jeff talking to them and having this really awkward conversation as if he's an alien trying to learn about how humans interact, and it's just really weird. Now, I will say the reason why this one is above the last few is one, because again, it's more in line with a lot of the more recent family visits, which are kind of clumped together here. But also, I feel like this one does have some game ramifications where we do see Sebastian pick Dom and Wendell, and also picks Donathan, and essentially picking all the guys, to which we see in this episode the women try to come together and ends up not fully going through. But also, we do get like Wendell giving up his family visit to go to Ghost Island, and we have Kellen being really pissed about it, and that's kind of interesting. But again, as a whole, like the loved ones themselves, not particularly interesting. I mean, it was nice to see like Wendell seeing his dad, and dad calls him his hero, and that's a nice moment for him. You have Dominic and his wife have a fun interaction where she tells him she hates him so much. But again, like as a whole, it's very insignificant here, and it's here number 30. Now number 29, we're moving on to another recent family visit, and the only thing that makes this kind of better is the fact that we have some more notable loved ones here, and that comes from Survivor Game Changers. And again, pretty standard family visit. It's propped up a bit because we are getting returning players here, and through that, obviously, we care more for the people that are out there, though at the end of the day, it's also still Survivor Game Changers, so cast is kind of eh. But again, I do think we get some good moments. I mean, Sarah and her husband comes out, and Sierra yells out he's sexy. We get a nice moment for Andrea where she talks about losing her sister in high school. We see Michaela's mom, who is a really fun personality. We see Mark the Human, so that's cool. Obviously, Monica Culpepper comes out there, and it was interesting to see her like talk game with him through the reward. And also, we get Cerie's son, Jared, who again was also a fun personality here. So again, it's not completely dull here, but again, in comparison to a lot of the ones that'll come later, this one's really just not that notable. So because that, it's here at number 29. Now number 28, moving on to another recent family visit. It's Edge of Extinction. Same thing. It's a thing that happened. Again, I feel like there are a couple more notable things here, particularly in the fact that Gavin ends up having his wife come out after they had only been married for 2 days before he went on Survivor, and that's an interesting storyline there. I also like seeing Ron and his husband. I thought they had a fun dynamic. especially when Ron tells him that he's lied and cheated in the game. And also, I think something that props this one up over the last couple is that we do get the family members being involved in the challenge, where the last couple we talked about are situations where it was just the survivors playing for their loved ones. Here in Edge of Extinction, we do have the bucket tossing competition through which the loved ones are actually participating. And to me, that kind of brings it up a bit as well, to where like at the end of the day, is this one super notable? No, not really. But it's that little change there that puts it above the other more recent ones, and because that's here at number 28. Now, number 27, moving on to another similar family visit, but one a bit further back in the history of the show, and that is from Survivor Cook Islands. And Cook Islands is one that I feel like I remember it being better than what it actually is. I mean, when I rewatched it here, it really just kind of bored me, especially by the end of it. I mean, the actual reward is so boring. Where again, it's them going to a tribe and they do this ceremony of jumping into the water. And it's like, I really don't care. Like, I feel like you get some decent moments early on. Again, you have Penner and his wife. And when he gets sent to exile, he just goes straight to her without any permission from Jeff. And that's kind of interesting. Again, it is also the same bucket throwing challenge. And through that, again, has the loved ones involved in all of it. Also, we had this interesting twist where the loved one had to pick who went on the reward with them instead of the player, and that was kind of interesting as well, though also takes away the agency from the player. So, I mean, like, again, it's an interesting twist, but actually probably a negative, really, but like, at least it's different, I guess. But again, like, as a whole, not super notable in the grand scheme of things, and the reward itself was just so boring to me. So, because that's here at number 27. Now, number 26. Moving on to another one of the more forgettable loved ones visits, where I think if it wasn't for the fact that this one was like a very different one, I think this one would be super forgettable, and that one is from Survivor Cagayan. And I mean, this is the only family visit to occur at the final four, and this one definitely feels a lot more in line with what we would see in like Australian Survivor or Survivor SA in the most recent season of the family visit happening at the very end of the season and them really just showing up just to watch the final immunity challenge. And this felt like a similar thing here, though obviously at the final four instead of final three, where really just out of the blue, their family members end up showing up. And again, like here, we don't get that many notable interactions. I will say that I do think Spencer's sister was kind of entertaining, and rooting for him during the challenge was kind of funny. And also Cass's husband has a funny reaction to watching Cass win. It's like, that's fine, but like everything else is like not that notable. I mean, Woo's cousin is there. I don't even think he gets to talk on screen. Tony's friend also is there, and again, that one's more so just focused around like Tony missing his wife. But again, like this is definitely one that stands out a bit more than the last few we talked about, just because again, like it's very different, but at the end of the day, it's still not super notable, especially because it's so short as well. With the family visit really just feeling like a backdrop for a lot of the other things going on. So because that for me, it's here at number 26. Now number 25, we're moving on to a similar family visit, though one that's a little bit more impactful, and that one is from Survivor Worlds Apart. And this is a similar thing. It happens at the final five, one round before the end. However, this one's a bit different because, again, there is at least a reward challenge to determine who gets their loved one. And then following that, the loved one then participates in the advantage before the immunity challenge. So again, it does feel like the loved one is more involved here, where here we do see Mike and his mom, and Mike wins the reward to have his mom help him during the practice session. That's like kind of a notable moment. Especially when she like leaves and saying that she feels like she let him down, and like obviously now knowing that he eventually goes on to win. I think that's a nice touch there as well. Also along the way, you get some pretty decent moments for the other players as well. I mean, you see Carolyn's husband, which is just kind of sad now, considering he did pass since then. But you see like Rodney talking about how he's now at peace with his sister's death. And also, I do find it funny that he calls his dad brother all the time here, where he literally says the line, "I'm so proud to be your son, brother." But also we have like Will and him getting this like massive energy rush after he sees his wife, which is just kind of funny considering how subdued he is for a lot of the season. And again, like as a whole, not a great family visit, but one that does have some more notable moments here. And it's here number 25. Now number 24, we're moving on back to the more recent family visits. A couple more that do stand out a bit more than the ones we've already talked about. Here we are starting that batch off with Survivor HHH. And HHH, again, like as a whole, is this super memorable? Not really. And from like a loved one perspective, a lot of these are like not super notable. I mean, you have like Ashley's dad, Ryan's dad, which I guess through that you do have them bonding over like getting this moment of coming out for a show together, considering they're both big fans. So at least there's that. But you can still, like, Chrissy's husband's there, Mike's wife. I was like, Lauren's sister, Sunny, I think has a fun moment where she goes to hug Jeff instead of Lauren. You also have Ben talking about how his wife saved his life, and that's a good moment. We also see Devin's mom, which I found weird considering I expected this to be a bigger moment on the rewatch, considering they for some reason just randomly used this clip in a recent commercial. But then like rewatching it, it's like it's such an unknowable moment there. But I do think the big thing throughout all this that makes this a bit more memorable is the fact that we do get the challenge. That's literally just them pulling rocks and having the match of their loved ones. So again, complete chance, which I do think is like kind of interesting. As really, it's like I don't care about the challenges. It really doesn't matter, though. It's kind of funny they took it to the extreme of like literally just doing it by chance. But here we do have like Chrissy not picking Ben, as she wants to make sure he regrets crossing her, which is a nice villainous moment for her there. So again, like overall, decent one here. It's here number 24. Now number 23. Another recent family visit, and this one is from Survivor David versus Goliath. And again, this one I do think has more notable interactions with loved ones here. We have Daisy's mom Hazel, which comes with a lot of fun moments. And this is where we get the line, "Where is Davy?" That's used a lot in RJP. We get a nice moment from Angelina where she tells her mom that she gave up immunity for rice, which is funny. We see Christian's girlfriend Emily, to which we see Gabby sobbing in the background, talking about how it's true love. But really for me, the biggest moment of this entire family visit, probably the best moment in recent loved one visit history, is when we see Kara Kay and her brother, and here we see Jeff tell them straight face, the thing about a brother-sister relationship is that one of you is not the parent. And again, what is this line? And to me, this is like the epitome of recent family visits. Like, this is what exemplifies it all, is the ridiculousness of Jeff saying these style of phrases. Though I think this is like one that's, again, so funny. It makes no sense. Like, why are we saying this? Like, why is this a thing that's happening? But for me, again, like the little moments throughout it, and then this like one line makes this one pretty notable to me. It's here, number 23. Now, number 22. We're moving on to a family visit that is a bit abnormal, and really the next two that we'll be talking about are both very old school family visits. In this one, we're starting it off with Survivor Australian Outback. And again, this is a bit of a weird one because this is one where they are not told about the family visit. It actually is the car challenge, interestingly, that leads to all this, where Colby wins the Pontiac Aztec and gets to spend a night in the Outback in it, to which we have Jeff picking him up at camp, and Jeff saying, "I'm going to go along with you," which is just kind of funny considering Jeff and Colby's friendship after the show. But again, obviously we get a lot of time focusing around the car, and it's a big commercial. But then they bring out the food, and guess who's bringing out the food? It's his mom. And like realistically, a lot of this family visit is like not that notable. It's really one that's kind of glossed over in the grand scheme of things. However, there's a lot of like little humor from the kind of strangeness of the Colby and his mom relationship. And he starts it off by talking about how he's missed the touch and intimacy of his loved ones. And we end up seeing him like take a shower and just staring at him in the distance, which is just a funny scene. He ends up calling it a conjugal visit, which is also really weird. And again, there's a lot of like weird, like subtle humor throughout a lot of this. But really, again, like a lot of this family visit is revolved around the car and also like how deteriorated Colby is. And that's not the most interesting thing in the world, but eventually they do go back to camp and she ends up divvying out some items from their loved ones. And this does lead to a kind of funny scene to me of Tina bragging about her daughter's legs. Obviously, her daughter being Katie Collins, who later plays Survivor, which ends up being like a fun little moment to me. But again, as a whole, not super memorable in the grand scheme of things, but does have a few funny moments that leave it here at number 22. Now, number 21, we're moving on to the first ever family visit. And here we do have Survivor Borneo. And straight up again, this is one that is very similar to the previous one we already talked about. It's another one where Sean wins reward without knowing that it's going to be a loved one's visit. Gets to stay overnight on a yacht, and he gets a lot of the reward initially, actually. He gets to spend the time with Jeff again, because that's obviously great. He gets a massage, to which we get this really weird scene. I can't believe this made the show, of the masseuse smacking his ass. But then we cut to Jeff telling Sean that the captain wants to meet with him, and the captain is familiar with you and is a big fan of you, which it makes no sense considering the show hasn't aired yet. So I don't get how Sean seems to just like take this with stride, but obviously it turns out to be his dad, which ends up being like, again, a funny moment there. But even beyond this, I think we get some good moments. Now, some of this I did debate on, like, does this quantify as part of the family visit? And like, there are fun moments from like Kelly being upset by Sean's decision, and we see a lot of complaining back at camp in between all these scenes about Sean. But again, like, I feel like that didn't really fit within the family visit aspect of it. But again, we do get some fun after they do return to camp, where they're asking Sean's dad about a lot of current events, and he knows nothing. To which Sue ends up calling him a doof, just like her son, which is just funny. And so I feel like you never really see a player on the show kind of mock a family member. But again, like, that was just like a lot of fun moments there, to where I could see the debate for being higher, but for me, I left it here at 21. Now, number 20. We're kind of getting around to like the more like middle tier family visits to me, ones that do fall in line with what you would expect from a family visit, but don't really do much beyond that. And here we're starting it off with Survivor Guatemala. And this is one that actually starts at the auction, where the final item for the auction ends up being a loved one's visit. And here we do see some pooling of money, but Judd ends up winning his loved one and gets to take 2 other people, and he picks Cindy and Steph. And all of the initial portion of the section, like outside of the auction part of it, ends up being like just kind of fine. However, I do feel like there's some funny moments once they get back to camp, particularly from Judd, where Judd talks about how his wife was impressed by his camping skills and she thought it was pretty hot, and she calls him a sexy camper and all that. It's just like kind of funny. But also this does have some game ramifications, as well, as here we do see Steph and Judd's wife Kristen talking, to which Steph reassures her that they have to make Jersey proud, which ends up being this reaffirming to her that causes Judd to be so upset at her later on when she does eventually blindside him. So again, like, at the end of the day, again, kind of a middling family visit here, but does have some notable moments that leave it here at number 20. Now number 19, another kind of baseline family visit, and this comes from Survivor Nicaragua. And again, this one's fine. Another one that has like a couple fun little moments. I mean, Dan Lembo gets his son, and his son's really handsy with him and like just continues to kiss him, which was something. We also get Fabio's mom finding out that he's now named Fabio. And we do see him get extremely emotional when he's not picked for the reward, where we do see that Chase, Sash, and Fabio made a deal to take each other for the challenge, only for Chase to not go through with it. And I think it is this emotion with Fabio that does lead to people feeling sympathetic towards him, which I do think greatens his chances of winning moving forward and gets talked about in Final Tribal Council. So again, that's a pretty notable moment. And also, I feel like the reward here is also a little funny, to where like for some reason Chase, Holly, and Sash are the only ones eating here, where like they get their own table to eat in the center while the other 3 family members are just sitting to the side, which just felt very awkward. But again, as a whole, very baseline family visit to me. It's here at number 19. Now number 18, we're getting to a family visit that I think is one that is probably better on paper than it is in actuality. As a scene of television, it's actually pretty good. However, my issue with it is the fact that, again, it barely has anything to do with the loved ones, and that one comes from Survivor Micronesia. And Micronesia here, again, is pretty fun. It is one that does have a couple notable moments from the loved ones. Again, Eric in particular, like when his brother comes out, we have his like fun reaction in telling him that that's Jeff Probst, only for Jeff to then call him a freak, which is so funny. We also see the return of HB. We see James's dad. And like, there's some fun family members here. But at the end of the day, I mean, like, so much of the scene is focused around the challenge, which is the coconut chop challenge, which just feels like a very weird challenge to have as the family visit, where, again, like, it is so focused around the dynamics within the players that it really feels like the loved ones have very little to do here. Now, along the way, we do get, like, one little fun scene of when Alexis eliminates James. We see James's dad on the side. He talks about how when he gets home, he's going to be talking about her. Outside that, again, like, the family members don't have much to do here. Even on the reward, they're just simply there. So again, for me, that's what lowers this one a bit, to where, like, as a scene of television, it's fine. It's actually, like, pretty fun, but it has almost nothing to do with the family visit. So because of that, for me, it's left here at number 18. Now number 17, moving on to a more notable family visit for me, and that comes from Survivor China. And this is one that, again, like, we got some decent interactions with family members. Like, even just the reveal that this was the family visit was really funny to me, where they talk about being paired in teams of 2 and just like completely deadpan. Jeff says, "Eric, you'll be paired up with your mom." And it's just like the way he says it was always just so funny to me, where he puts like no gravitas to it. But even beyond that, I mean, we do obviously have Todd and his sister, where he learns that his sister miscarried, which is a notable scene here, particularly for like how people didn't believe him and thought he was doing this like fair play-esque lie. But like during the challenge, which ends up being a blindfold challenge, we do get this like kind of notable moment of Amanda and her sister communicating through bird noises. We also have Courtney talking back to Probst when he says that she's still looking for her father. But here we do see Denise win the reward, and I'm not the biggest Denise fan, but I did feel like it was a nice moment to see her get a call from her daughter. And the reward itself is also kind of funny, where like Amanda freaks out over getting chocolate cake, and they bring back chocolate cake on their fingers for the other players to lick off, and that's just weird. But again, overall, like a very solid family visit here. For me, it's at number 17. Now, number 16, we're moving on to a pretty notable family visit. I feel like this is probably one of the more notable family visits. However, I feel like it's for like one specific moment. And while that is a really great moment, I feel like everything else is just kind of fine. And that comes from Survivor Cambodia. And again, like this is one where I think this is the first of the modern family visits. I feel like this is where the family visits kind of change to what they end up being in the modern day, of more focused around what the family members mean to the players themselves, instead of like focusing more so on the family members. This also ends up being the earliest family visit in the history of the show at this point, to where I feel like that also changed up when they did the family visit, where I think they wanted to spend more time in the family visit moving forward. But obviously here we do get the Jeremy and Val moment, where he learns that he's having a boy, and again, that's a really nice moment for him. Even beyond that, we have the conclusion of Spencer's arc about how he had never told his girlfriend he loved her, only for him to tell her there, which is nice, even though I believe they broke up since then, so it's maybe not as nice anymore. But again, good for him, I guess. You have Keith getting his wife Big D coming out, which was kind of funny. And you get like some other notable family visits, like Abby's mom coming out once again. You have Kelly getting Dale coming out. You have Joe, which again, like maybe not the most likable now, but at the time he gets this like pretty satisfying family visit, where he had talked about even in his first time that his dream is just to get to the family visit and have his dad come out. And here he does get that, and we get this nice interaction between the two, where Joe's dad tells him that he's never had a friend like him, and that you're my hero. And again, I feel like that again is a nice moment for Joe, even though it's Joe. But again, at the end of the day, also it's like the reward itself is like really skipped over. I feel like they really spend no time on the family visit, and actually really spend more time on the people not at the reward, where Jeremy, Tasha, and Spencer end up getting left behind here, and this is where they form their final three. So again, it is funny that this family visit seems to focus more so on the people that didn't go in the reward, but still, it's a pretty notable one to me, and because that's here, number 16. Now, number 15, moving on to another family visit that has a few notable moments throughout it, and that is the one from Survivor One World. And really from this point forward, I feel like these are all like the good family visits in my eyes. I feel like everyone from this point forward ends up being a pretty notable one here. And here we do get, again, some good moments from Tarzan and his constant talking about loving his wife. And we get a nice reunion between the two, to where he talks about having a quantum entanglement with her, which, sure, I guess. We also have Christina's dad coming out, and she talks about how he just had a kidney transplant, and that's a nice story. I feel like this is also the first time that we get Jeff's obsession over father-daughter relationships, where we see Chelsea and her dad, and Jeff says that he now sees the little girl come out of her, which is just like a really weird thing to say. But really, I feel like the main notable thing about this reward for me is Kat. And Kat is a really fun character here. Again, she sees her cousin Robbie and ends up crawling to him like a dog. And we also have her winning the reward, only to then pick Kim and Alicia to go with her, which upsets most of the tribe, as they wanted Tarzan and Christina to get their loved ones. Also, Robbie ends up being a kind of fun character here, where like he doesn't get that much screen time, but I did find it really funny when at the reward, when talking about game, the way he starts that conversation is by saying, "What's the dizzle?" So yeah, like for me, this is a pretty notable one. But really, at the end of the day, it's not as strong as the ones we're about to be talking about. So it's here at number 15. Now, number 14. we're moving on to a notable loved ones visit for me. However, I feel like on the rewatch, it wasn't as strong outside of one specific moment, which is why it's still around this spot. And that comes from heroes versus villains. And again, like, you do have some decent stuff here. I mean, you get Rupert and Laura again, which leads to kind of a weird moment where it's their 12-year anniversary, and Rupert responds with saying that feels like it's only 12 months, 12 days, which just feels like Rupert really hamming it up, but not actually knowing what to say. You then have Russell obviously getting his wife, and when Jerry wins reward, she doesn't pick him, which obviously upsets him. Also, we do end up actually spending a decent amount of time on the reward here, but I did find it mostly boring. I mean, they go to the blowholes and throw coconuts into the holes, and again, wasn't that interesting to me. Though, again, we do get some good content from Sandra, getting her Uncle Fernando there, which allows her to talk about her mother's passing and how her husband's in Afghanistan, and that's good personal content for her. But the best part of this entire reward, what actually makes this high on this list, is Colby and his brother Reed, which is just so funny. It's such a funny moment here of Colby getting so frustrated at Reed throughout the entire challenge for no reason, where he keeps on saying, "God damn it, Reed." He says, "Talk to me for God's sakes." And Jeff responds to that by saying he's been this way all season, Reed, which again, this really pissed off Colby during this scene is just so hilarious to me. Ends up being the most memorable moment from this family visit for me, and because that's here at number 14. Now at number 13, we are moving on to a family visit that I will say, as a whole, isn't as notable, though I do feel like it plays into the game a bit more, and I think it kind of fits in line with the next one we'll be talking about as well. So here we are starting that off with Survivor South Pacific. Now, South Pacific's obviously another season with Redemption Island, and through that, Ozzy wins the duel and gets the decision on who gets loved ones here. And along the way, we do get Sophie's fun little moment that we eventually get a call back to in Winners at War, where she tells her dad that she wants Reese's banana bread and hamburgers when she gets home. We get Coach having his brother come out, which the fact that it's not his assistant coach, I think instantly shows you the lessened version of Coach that's here in South Pacific, at least from a character standpoint. But also we do see Brandon's dad come out, Russell Hance's brother, Sean. And to me, this is the most notable aspect of this family visit for me, is we do end up seeing Coach, Albert, and Brandon being picked to get loved ones visits. And I mean, right away, we do see Coach trying to make a deal with Ozzy, saying that he'll take him to final 3, which is just dumb, but plays into his downfall later on. But again, the most notable thing here is this dilemma with Brandon, where we do see Sean telling Brandon to play the game like a Hance. And he's upset he's not playing the Hance way, leading to Sean deciding to try to play the game. And he approaches Coach and essentially tries to use the Russell Hance sort of tactics on him, of trying to kind of guilt him into taking Brandon to the end, saying that his fate's in your hands now. To which Coach obviously doesn't take that lightly, saying that he was trying to bully him, which I don't feel like that's technically what he was doing. But hey, it is interesting to see Sean actually try to play the game in this situation, and essentially telling Brandon to just do whatever Coach says, which doesn't work out for him. But and to see more of this dilemma with Brandon and how he struggles with having to play the game, I do think is an interesting aspect of this family visit, because that for me, it's here number 13. Now number 12, we're moving on to again another family visit that does revolve a lot around the game, and that is the family visit from Survivor Philippines. And Philippines is a weird one here, where I feel like a lot of the more game aspects of this are things I didn't actually remember as much. However, the things I did remember are, again, we do get some decent family members here. Again, you do get Malcolm and his brother Miles, who comes off as a bit of a doof. Well, you see Miles almost knocking him over when he runs in, and after they win the reward, we do see him actually knock him over. We have Scoopin, who again, Scoopin, icky figure now. However, I think at the time, even though Scoopin, again, not the greatest at the game, but was a pretty fun character, and to see him freak out over seeing his son was a fun moment there. And we also get the humor of now with context of his son saying that he's the best human I've ever known. I've learned it all from him, which is maybe not the best thing to be saying now. We also get Carter getting emotional, which is the only semblance of emotion Carter shows across this entire season. But I mean, obviously the big moment here is Lisa's brother Justice, to which he just yells out, "Sister, sister," as he runs out. But again, that's fun in its own right. However, the thing that I completely forgot about all this is, again, how much game is involved in this, where after the reward, Malcolm wins the reward and ends up taking Scoopin and Lisa, to which this ends up kind of backfiring on Malcolm, to where it feels like this is the point where Lisa is convinced that she needs to take the shot at Malcolm, where you see Justice actually playing pretty hard in really strong-arming her and Scoopin into turning against Malcolm, which I think is an aspect of the family visit that we don't see too often. Where, I mean, we'll talk about ones in the future of like situations where family members try to tell their loved ones what's in their best interest, but they just don't listen. While here we do actually see Lisa listen to it. I feel like that's an interesting aspect of this one. That, considering that and also the fun that comes before it, it ends up landing here number 12. Now number 11, moving on to another family visit that does have a major impact on the game, and this one ends up being from survivor Vanuatu. Now, this one's also kind of a different one, where it does start off with them pretending like they're just getting video calls from home, where we do see them pretending to be back at home when obviously they're in like a set that you can clearly tell is not a normal background, but ends up being a Q&A about the season that Eliza ends up winning, and we get the reveal that the family members are actually there when we have Eliza's mom running out, which is a nice twist here, and we do get to see the other loved ones come out, to which they get to say goodbye to them, to which it was nice to see like Scout and her partner, and Amy and her girlfriend, which obviously seeing these same-sex relationships on the show at this point was a bit abnormal. We'd also see Julie and her friend Justin, which again, he's a guy that's clearly in love with Julie, right? And it's weird to see Jeff there, considering obviously she later dates Jeff. And we see Chris and his girlfriend Lori at the time. That plays a factor later as we do see them come back for the immunity challenge, where they're paired up with their loved ones. And Chris obviously knows that he's on his way out. And we have him desperately trying to win immunity, to which obviously he ends up losing, and we haven't had this like sad farewell to Lori where she feels bad for costing him the game, and he apologizes to her for not winning, and like obviously this is all ironic considering he does go on the win, but this ends up playing a major factor in the game, as this obviously makes the women feel bad for Lori and decide to not vote out Chris at this point because of that. But even beyond that, the actual visit itself here is also kind of fun, where we hear Eliza's mom, Susan, talk about all the things she was worried about with Eliza. We have her laughing over Eliza almost getting voted out for talking too much. And we do end up having Susan give Eliza the shirt off her back, which was a nice little moment too. So again, like there's a decent amount of interesting moments here, and mixing that with the fact that it is one that also affects the gameplay, I did end up landing it here number 11. Now number 10, we're moving on to what is at this point for me all of the genuinely good family visits. I think all these are really, really strong through and through. And at number 10, we're starting it off with one of the more notable ones to me, and that comes from survivor Marquesas, which ends up being the first ever in-person full family visit. Like obviously we had Borneo and Australian Outback that had one family member come out. Here we have them all come out, and this ends up being a pretty fun reveal here. And we get to see people like V's husband Leander. We see Pascal's wife Beverly, which again, the amount of focus on Pascal is so funny to me, considering what happened to him after the show, and especially like where we get this confessional from him talking about how he's not proud of some of the things he's done and how he's gonna change, which I don't think he changed that much. But really, a lot of the entertainment from this one comes from Kathy, who has her son Patrick come out. And Kathy being so excited that he's there and kind of obnoxious cheering for him is really funny. We also get the like checkers style challenge that we see periodically, which ends up being kind of a lame challenge for the loved ones here, but they are the ones playing in it. And it was funny to see that it was Sean's friend that ends up being the one to eliminate Leander, which he decides to make it random by throwing a hat in the air, and the person that's closest to ends up being eliminated, which again, kind of lame. But again, we see Patrick winning the reward, which ends up not being a reward for him, which is what makes this so funny. Again, he does come back to camp, gets to spend a night, and really he seems to be like the complete opposite of Kathy, where unlike Kathy, who is this larger in life character, Patrick is just so subdued, and he just hates it there. Like, they make him do work, they make him smash coconuts, he's having a terrible time, he hates the food, he talks about everyone's gonna think his mother's crazy. Kathy tries to talk game with her, to which I do think we have Kathy articulating strategy pretty well here, but it's funny that like she brings up the concept of trying to flip the game by pulling over the general, and Patrick's response to this is he doesn't like seeing this side of her and talks about it being messed up. And again, it is really funny to see Patrick at camp here, again, clearly hating his entire time there. And while at the end of the day, like, this does take up a good chunk of the episode, it's like half of the episode here, it is a really funny segment. So because of that, for me, it's here at number 10. Now, number 9, very similar segment, though I think one a bit more integral to the game, or at least more interesting from a game perspective, and also more of the loved ones have more to do here, and that is from Survivor Thailand. Obviously, the one immediately afterwards, and the reward is mostly the same. I mean, obviously, we still have each of the family members coming out. They participate in a challenge. The winner of the challenge gets to stay overnight. That aspect of it is still the same. However, something that is different is that, again, the challenge here is a lot more interesting. It is the gross food eating challenge, to where the loved ones have to eat the food. And we do get some great reactions from Helen, with her rooting for her husband in a really ridiculous way. We also see Brian's wife, Cece, to which Clay responds by instantly saying hi to her, which is funny. We see Jake's wife, which, again, gets this ridiculous over-the-top content similar to Pascal, though from what I understand at least, doesn't have the humor based on the things that happen later in his life. But again, the challenge itself is fine. Again, obviously, them eating a whole bunch of insects, and Helen's husband ends up winning the challenge, to which, again, we get some fun from him. He does seem like a big personality. He actually kind of reminds me of Judd to a degree, just probably not as doofusy as Judd, but he does seem to have a good head on his shoulders, where we do see him talk to Helen and blatantly tell Helen that Brian is the threat, and why aren't you getting rid of Brian, only for her to completely turn him down. But again, like, overall, I think it's a similar one to Marquesas. I think the Marquesas one overall is funnier, but I feel like this one has more actually going on throughout more of it, with a lot more of the loved ones having more of a focus. So again, because of that, for me, it ends up landing here at number 9. Now, number 8, we're moving on to, again, another similar family visit, and here we're moving on to Survivor All-Stars, which essentially is just a redo of Thailand. They do the exact same challenge, loved ones come out, and here we do have some notable loved ones here. Obviously, we have Rupert and Laura, to which they really go at it at the mat, to which even Jeff is saying, "Whoa, Rupert, whoa." But I do think this challenge was structured a lot better. Again, there was one person eliminate each round, unlike Thailand, where it really was more so just finish the food. We get Jeff outlining the rules, to which he says, after you finish eating, you can drink some water after that, to which we cut to Jai, Jenna's loved one, which leads to some humor when Jai eventually gets DQ'd for drinking water mid-challenge, and he ends up complaining about the rules, and all that was really funny. Again, a really funny moment there. We also have Bucky Bowe being a notable figure here, and him just like swallowing the grubs whole, winning the challenge. But really, it's like, it doesn't end at the challenge. Like, there's more intrigue afterwards, to where their reward ends up being a night stay at the Upgrade Shapira camp, to which Tom ends up picking Rob to go with him, and they end up getting really, really drunk, to which we end up seeing Tom say that he wished he got his wife or his neighbor's sister as his loved one instead, and we do have the loved ones being put to work, to which we do have Bo end up losing the spear to the Hawaiian sling, to which obviously Rupert is annoyed, but this is where we do get kind of an ickier moment to a degree of Rob calling Bo a bigger dumbass than his dad, which obviously ends up being a major source of conflict between the two postseason. But I mean, like, really, that's old school Boston Rob for you. But overall, again, like, I feel like All Stars here is pretty fun, a pretty notable one to me. It's here at number 8. Now, number 7, we're moving on to another pretty fun one, and that ends up coming from Survivor Panama, which does have an interesting aspect to this one, to where the challenge winner ends up being able to divvy out how much interaction with their loved one the other people get, which I always found to be an interesting aspect here, to where obviously Terry gets an overnight stay at a villa and gets to pick someone to go alongside him, to which he ends up picking Shane, who ends up having his loved one be his son Boston, which ends up being a really notable moment there. Also picks Cerie's husband HB to be someone that gets to stay overnight at camp. Picks Aris to be someone gets a hug from his mom, while Danielle gets sent to exile with nothing. And again, seeing Shane with his son Boston was nice. Terry and his wife was interesting to see, considering his wife seemed to be more of a strategist than he was, and seemed to be trying to making a deal with Shane. We obviously have the conjugal visit aspect of it, and how Terry is pretty blatant with the fact that they had sex overnight. But also, really, for me, the main fun of all this is HB being back back at camp, to which this feels like another one of these Patrick sort of scenes of HB being someone that's clearly out of his element, and through that does have some funny reactions from him being scared by a boom in the fire. We have him being disgusted by the dirty water. He has him being annoyed that he's being put to work, to which he says he's being worked like a dog. But also beyond this, we get a great moment here for Suri, where this ends up being a moment where Suri kind of appreciates how far she's come, and we even see HB crying over how proud he is of Suri and how well she's doing. Again, I feel like overall, that's what kind of elevates this one above the last few to me, is I feel like it also has the personal touch that I think was kind of missing from the last few, and because of that, for me, it lands here number 7. Now, number 6, moving on to a pretty iconic family visit in my eyes, one that definitely stands out, and that is the one from Survivor Tocantins. Obviously, this is one that we do get at the auction, where one of the items is a video message from their loved one, and we do see everyone giving their money to Taj since she left a young baby at home, and through that she gets a message from her husband, Eddie, to where it ends with him saying, "See you back at the camp," to which Taj doesn't hear at first, and we do have Jeff having to point it out to her, leading to a really big reaction from her, and we get this fake dilemma that I don't love of having either her get Eddie back at the camp while no one else gets their loved ones, or everyone else gets their loved ones at camp while she has to go to exile also with Eddie, which is a dumb decision, as obviously she's going to do that. But there again, we get some nice content between Taj and Eddie on Exile, with her talking about wanting a conjugal visit. And Eddie comes off as a pretty fun presence here. Good content there. I mean, like content that's like kind of similar to what we just saw with Suri and HB, where he talks about how he's proud of her, and he gets some content about like not liking being around the scorpions. And like, again, it's similar content there. But again, still, the initial reaction there from her is great. But also we get some good content back at camp. We get a lot of focus around Erin, which is kind of weird, but again, showing her talking about how much she has grown. But really, the best part of the stuff back at camp obviously comes from Coach, where his loved one ends up being his assistant coach. And again, like this is just a hilarious sequence. Again, like Coach is such a ridiculous character across this season, but here, I mean, we see him instantly tell his assistant coach that he is being called by everyone the Dragon Slayer, and that he's running the show. Again, in a position where he had just been blindsided a couple rounds ago and is currently on the bottom, and also in a position where he gave himself the name Dragon Slayer. But he also has this quote of, if he had the choice between his assistant coach and a filet mignon, he would pick his assistant coach. We also have this ridiculous scene of his assistant coach cracking his back. Again, like it's a lot of fun content there. When mixing that in with the more heartwarming elements of Taj's visit, it does leave it here at number 6. Now number 5, we're moving on to one that I was actually surprised I put this high. It was one that didn't really stand out to me that much before the rewatch. However, I liked it a lot more on the rewatch, and as the family visit from Survivor Gabon. And this is kind of a more abnormal one where, again, they aren't told explicitly that they'll be getting family visits, but we do get a reward challenge for videos from home, and Bob ends up winning that reward, and while he's watching his video at the reward, his wife shows up behind him, obviously revealing that this is the family visit. And this is also kind of a funny little moment where, like, Bob's wife literally has to get, like, almost right to his face before he recognizes that she's there, and he's just, like, confused the entire time. But we then get Bob returning to camp with his wife and the other loved ones, to which, again, this was a pretty heartwarming moment to see these people just be surprised with their loved ones and running out in the middle of the field to go and hug them. And we get the typical Kenny bragging about his game to his sister, talking about he's running a game, again, right before he proceeds to be blindsided at the following vote. But the two big moments here for me end up being one, Sugar, where she does get closure for her dad's passing and spreads her dad's ashes in the river, and that was a pretty nice moment for her. But also another one that I did like, even though, again, it doesn't really stick, is Maddie talking about how he's been avoiding the tough things in life and how he needs to face up to his fear and grow up, and he proceeds to propose to his girlfriend, which was nice development for Maddie as a character, someone that I do think is kind of forgotten about at this point in Survivor, but someone I've always liked, and I do think here he does get a pretty nice moment there. And really just overall, again, like I found this one to be pretty fun. I like this one on the rewatch. I feel like it had some genuinely heartwarming moments across it, while also still having some humor along the way. So for me, it's here number 5. Now number 4, and for me, these are the top 4. Like this is a pretty clear break-off point for me, where this is the top tier. At number 4, we're actually in one of the more recent ones on the board, and that is Millennials versus Gen X, which I will say again, like this is pretty much the first true modern family visit. Where again, like for me, like Cambodia was kind of the transition point. For me, Lineage Gen X is the first one that fully goes in to these like big family visits where you get a lot of focus on the player and their reaction to their loved one and Jeff interviewing them. Like this feels like the first one of the modern format, and through that has the same like flaws of a lot of that. But I think the biggest pro here is Adam. And really, like, Adam's story across this season is a really incredible one, a really heartbreaking one, in that fact that he does obviously lose his mother by the end of it. But I do think it is that emotional weight that really boons this scene. I do think this is a truly heartbreaking scene. This is a truly emotional scene, seeing Adam have his brother come out and him deciding to not use the reward steal in a position where he obviously really wants to, only for him to later get picked for a reward. And on the reward, he ends up learning that his mom's chemotherapy hasn't been working and she stopped getting treatment. And it is this brutal scene, essentially him having to come to terms with the fact that his mother is nearing her deathbed, and we have him crying, saying, why is this happening? And that is like genuinely one of the most heartbreaking moments in the history of the show to me. Like, it's a moment where you really feel the weight of all this pressure that is on Adam's shoulders. And I do think it is something that greatly boons this family visit as a moment of reality television. Now, beyond that, again, the rest of it is fine. You have like a couple like funny moments from like Hannah being the one to comfort her mom instead of the other way around. You have Zeke's dad, who has like a really fun energy, and he calls Zeke his hero. And I think with the context of what happens in Game Changers in mind, I do think that also makes this a more interesting interaction, considering they talk about how they've not always been close, but have gotten to know each other more recently. And we do also see this like essentially initial bonding session between Adam and Jay, to where this is kind of where their rivalry turns into a friendship, where obviously Adam is appreciative of Jay taking him on the reward, and we see Adam give him the reward steal. And all this is like pretty good content. I think this is a genuinely great family visit, despite being in the modern format. And a lot of that, again, is because of the emotional weight that is behind all of it. But because of that, for me, it is here, number 4. Now, number 3, we're moving on to another family visit that does have some emotional weight. Obviously, not to the extent of the Lineage Gen X one, but one that does greatly impact the game across the season. And this one is from Survivor Karamoan. And again, this is one that is really important to the game, being the setup for this massive downfall for Brenda and her winning this family visit after clearly having a hard time on the island and being so giddy when she sees her dad, and she ends up winning the reward with him, only for her to then pick someone to go on the reward with her, to which she obviously picks Dawn, but then gets the dilemma of giving up their loved ones' visits in order to give everyone else their loved ones' visits, to which she obviously does. But this obviously ends up being devastating for Dawn, in which we see her being so frustrated and angry throughout the reward, where we see everyone celebrating on the float within sight, where Dawn just talks about how screwed she was and how she wants to spit, which has always been a weird line to me. Even the reward here ends up being kind of fun, where we do have Cochran calling out his dad for trying to act like he's cool. Also, we do have like a little fun moment along the way of Cochran calling out his dad for trying to act cool and wearing like sunglasses while controlling the grill, and like all that's kind of funny too. And like, again, like, overall, again, like it's probably one of the most important loved ones visits in terms of how the game plays out, where this like further solidifies this relationship between Brenda and Dawn, only for Dawn to blindside Brenda by the end of this episode. This provides this massive downfall for Brenda, where Cochran uses this to further put a target on her back. And obviously we have this breakdown from Dawn over all this that, again, just makes this a super notable one here, that obviously just all culminates in the final tribal with Brenda's hostility towards Dawn. So again, all this is super notable to me, and because that's here, number 3. Now, number 2, we're moving on to a family visit that I will say straight up, if this was any other season, this would be a bottom tier family visit. However, because it's on this specific season and with this specific context of this season, it's at number 2, and that is from Winners at War. And again, this family visit is the epitome of what I hate about modern family visits. It is a family visit where we get so much focus around the players seeing their families, talking about their kids, and we end up having everyone get the reward and all their families getting to go back to camp. We see the people on the edge of extinction get their families as well, and this takes up about half of the episode, which is ridiculous. However, it's Winners at War. It is the culmination of 20 years of Survivor up to that point. It is a season with all these people who we have come to know over the previous 20 years. It is these massive figures in the history of the show, these people with massive legacies have brought so much to the show. And that is what makes this an all-time great family visit. If it wasn't for that, if this was just any random season, if this is a group of newbies and they got their families to come out there and they got to spend all that time at the beach, like, it would be so boring to me. And to be fair, I found it boring the first time I watched it. However, again, what makes this so impactful is the fact that we know these people so well at this point and see how Survivor has affected these people's lives, and ends up being such a great moment here where we see Tony's wife for the first time after she couldn't make it to the Kakian family visit, and that ends up being a great moment for him. And we see Tyson getting Rachel and one of his kids coming out, to which Tyson had never had a family visit until now, and that's a nice moment for him. We have Jeremy and his entire family running out to him, and that's a fantastic moment. We have Sophie and her fiance, to which again she repeats the line she said at South Pacific about wanting Reese's and hamburgers. We get some awkwardness from Michelle getting her sister while everyone else is getting a romantic partner, so again, I found that kind of funny. But again, that's all really great. Again, feeling like a celebration of the show up to that point, but then we also get this For the Edge of Extinction players as well. And we get Ethan getting his wife out there. We see Natalie and Nadia get back together. We obviously see Boston Rob and Amber and their family. We see Parvati and John Fincher, which is weird now, but at the time it was cool. We see Wendell and his dad, Yul and his wife. And probably the big one here, again, like continuation of Millennials vs. Gen X. We see Adam and his dad and talking about his relationship with his mom again. And that's all great content here. Like, it really feels like, a true celebration of the series. Everyone gets their content to shine here. No one is left out throughout this entire family visit. And again, like, if this was any other season, it would probably be one of the worst. But because this is Winners at War and because of the personal attachment there is to all of these players, it is here number 2. Now, number one family visit of all time is kind of obvious, right? I mean, I think it's the most iconic of them all. One of the most iconic scenes in history of the show. It is from Survivor Pearl Islands, where here we obviously have Fairplay's dead grandma lie. And again, it's just simply iconic. I mean, we have a really interesting challenge here where we're essentially having the players and their loved ones play the match game while also it being mixed in with the coconut chop challenge. And here, because of Fairplay's story, we do see the players throw the challenge to Fairplay outside of Sandra, who recognizes Fairplay's lie, but gets berated for doing so. We also get some funny moments from like Dara and her boyfriend getting everything wrong, clearly not knowing each other that well. Also found it funny that they were asked, what is your loved one's nickname? And Burton's nickname is Burton. But obviously Fairplay is the big thing here. I mean, the she died dude line is just so hilarious. And again, it's so funny. Obviously, this was a plan that they agreed upon before the season. But Thunder D just forgets about it initially and acts like so happy-go-lucky until Fairplay asks him how's grandma, to which he kind of like remembers the plan. And that was all ridiculous. And obviously we had the great reveal. I mean, we go to the reward where everyone else is suffering on a new camp while Fairplay and Thunder D get a day together, to which we have Fairplay revealing that his grandma is at home watching Jerry Springer right now, which, again, fantastic moment. One of the most iconic moments for the series. Well, obviously there isn't as much like emotional weight here as there is with something like Caramoan or Millennials vs. Gen X or even Winners at War. I do feel like as a moment of television, I feel like this is definitely the one that stands out the most. It is the most iconic of them all, and it's the most entertaining of them all. So for me, it is here at number 1. But there we go. I mean, that is my ranking of every loved one visit in the history of Survivor US. Now, again, moving forward, I would still like to do similar rankings to this for other types of like reoccurring things across Survivor, so stay tuned for those. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.